Thank you. Oh, I feel like I should curtsy to that, but I won't. Thanks ever so much for coming. It's that you are crammed in here, so it's going to be a really nice atmosphere. And I would love you to look around the room at who else is here. And when you leave here today, at the end of this now we're going to talk for about 50 minutes, that you hook up with each other to take this forward and make this meaningful. Because an hour is a little window to get your thinking going and give you some new ways of thinking. But together you can actually make a real difference ongoing to each other. And believe me, the most effective and efficient way is to do it together, rather than be working on your own and trying to work things out for yourself. So please do, you are the Women's Network, so it's great if you can help each other. Now I'm going to start with a story about my experience of the inner critic. For most of my career, I've done presentations and talks like this. But in the last 4 years, I find myself talking for longer and longer periods of time. And what I found, especially with small groups, was happening to me was I'd be talking away quite happily, and suddenly my inner critic would say, "You're boring, everybody. Shut up." Which is incredibly unhelpful. And what would happen? So the thought would come in. I'd get this slight knot in my stomach. The thought would come in, "Shut up, you're boring. Everybody needs to speak. They need to do their thing, and you better get out of the way." And so my energy would drop, because at first I'd be distracted. So, I've got this going on in my head, and I'm distracted. And the second thing that would happen was I might rush through something. So when I'm trying to talk to you today about a concept, I need it to land with you, or that it's not going to be useful. And the danger was I'd rush to the end and not really land something. So whilst I got good feedback and I was still happy presenting with people and facilitating workshops and things, I knew it was something that was just inhibiting my performance. It could be better. So in order to understand what was going on, where's this coming from, I have to take myself to a quiet place in my mind, clear my mind of everything, connect with my feelings, my intuition and my thoughts. And in that space, visualize me presenting, and visualize a time where that inner critic has popped up. And so I find myself in the space, and I can feel the inner critic come in, and then I hear my mother's voice. "Tracey, shut up, you talk too much." Karen doesn't get a look in. Now Karen's my sister, who's much quieter than me. So that, when I'm 52, has travelled all the way from when I was 4. And it's come at me without any pre-warning. There's just little voices come up, this inner critic. But now I've identified it, it doesn't go away, it's still there because it's embedded. But I recognise it. So when it comes to visit me, I can just dismiss it, or I can rethink it, because all it is a thought. It's a thought that I've embedded and I've carried with me. But I can change that thought. And what we're here today is not about wholesale change. It's not about going out of the room and being completely different people. It's about really honing into your thoughts, understanding what's driving them, change the thinking, you'll change the feeling, and you'll change the behaviour. So it's really, really simple. It's just about your thoughts. It's simple, but you need to commit to it. Because actually, when you first start working on trying to change your thinking, it can be quite clunky and uncomfortable. And we get used to these thoughts, these negative critics, as a crutch. Worrying, as damaging as it is, becomes a dysfunctional crutch. It's a groove you get used to, and you rely on it. So to change that, to change the game, you've got to put some effort in. And so as you've come here today, and you thought about committing an hour of your time, I'd just like you to think about how committed, how motivated you are to deal with the inner critic or the negative head chatter. And if you could just jot down from 1 to 10 how motivated you feel to actually put some effort and time and commitment into diminishing the impact of your inner critic. And we'll come back and look at that later when we get to the end of the session. But it's just for you to really think about how committed you are. Okay, so we're going to use the session to firstly raise our self-awareness and to understand why we're like we are. But it's really to help you tune into you and the things that are bothering you the most. I'm going to share a very, very simple model with you, and that's from Steve Peters' The Chimp Paradox. And there are lots of psychological models, but I use this one because of its simplicity, and it's very, very visual. So when you're in the moment, when you're stressed, you can call on this, and you can see it, and you can use it. And then we've got a couple of tools for you to take out that are in the slides that you can use going forward, and I would urge you to sort of revisit those and use those slides. This is a simple model of the brain. And our behaviour is driven from the limbic system, the frontal lobe, and the parietal. So that's all your behaviours that are driven from those three areas of your brain. And that's the areas that Steve Peters focuses on, this model. And the first bit is the limbic system. Can you see? I think you can all see that. And that's what Steve Peters terms as the chimp. And in there is your primitive brain. It's your fight, flight and freeze. And that works really, really well if you're walking down the road and it's dark and someone's running up behind you and they might hit you over the head. Because it makes you move quickly. You respond. It's your fight, flight or freeze. It worked really well in primitive times when we had to get together with other people to build homes and to, dwellings and to fight off tigers. And it's lovely now. It's not all bad, the chimp. The chimp is the joyous you. It's the one that takes you to the fairground to have fun. It's the one that's playful. So there's these upsides to the chimp. The downside to the chimp is this over sort of compensation of fear that it holds. So the chimp needs to belong. So if you stand up here and you're presenting and it's something you're not used to doing, then the chimp is on high alert and saying, don't mess up because no one's going to like you. Don't mess up because they won't give you that next job. If you don't perform well, no one's going to give you a job. So the chimp does all this to you. It does the worrying, and goes quite skewiffy. So all my friends, no one's bothered to like my Facebook page. Nobody likes me. And it's a horrible feeling, it's anxious. And then it's the worrying as well. So all that is the fight, flight or freeze mechanism that's not working well. And, in our modern day life, there's so much that comes at you, that threatens your well-being in how you're exposed, how you are with your friends. It's all the stuff about meeting a partner is in there as well. So all the emotional drivers. So any time that you're feeling even slightly exposed, your chimp is on high alert. And you start to get this anxious feeling and it can get out of control. So that's the chimp. But there's the fun side of it. There's also this faulty mechanism that sort of takes you back to caveman. Things are going to be disastrous. The human, Steve Peters calls the person you want to be. That's your lovely, rational self. That's the person you want to be when you're presenting in front of people. That's the person you want to be. It's the greys and not the black and white. It's the person you want to be when someone might be quite abusive to you and you just want to be very adult about responding back instead of getting your chimp out and reacting. So the human is the one that sees evidence. So when you're worrying, your chimp's out, worrying, getting anxious, it's your human that says, whoa, 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 whoa. Using up too much energy, that's not going to happen. And it's your human that calms you down. That says, look at the reality. Things aren't that bad. Come on now. So that's your human. And that's the person you want to be. And you absolutely want to be the human at work. You don't really want to be the chimp all the time at work. It's quite exhausting as well, being a chimp all the time and having this emotional centre drive in you. So the last piece in the puzzle is the computer. The computer is the autopilot. It's the task that you do that you don't even have to think about because they've been stored in your computer. So if you think about a drive to a client or a drive to work, it's a drive you do every day. We can see the three things at play. As you're driving, you're listening to music, you're singing, you're looking around, you might be having a phone call, you're doing anything but thinking about how you drive. So that's the computer that's doing that for you. Super efficient. Somebody cuts you up and chimp comes out to play. So, you idiot, what do you think you're doing? You nearly killed me, what a twit. Now, if you've got a particularly rampant chimp, you would have your foot on the accelerator, bobbing your horn and trying to get one back on him. Then, and the reason it's called the chimp paradox is because he saw someone waving their arms around in road rage and decided to call it the chimp paradox. It's this emotional thing. And then your human comes into play, and your human says to you, actually, don't drive so badly. He's just let him go. He's an idiot. Don't risk your own. Don't risk points. So it's your human that starts to calm you down. So there you can see the three parts that behaviour drivers in play, the three parts of your brain. Now, the problem is the chimp is 5 times more powerful than your human. So when you're up against something new, when you're feeling slightly uncomfortable, your chimp will be on high alert. If someone says something to you that you feel is underhand or mean, your chimp is first out of the box. And it takes your human more time to catch up. So that's why when people annoy us, we probably snap or we say things we don't want to, or we're in a meeting and we don't react as we want to because the chimp's out of the block first. The computer is incredibly quick. It's 20 times faster than your human, which is fantastic. It makes you super efficient, but it's not always effective because if you've programmed your computer wrongly, then the stuff that's in there will be going on without you even knowing about it on an automatic level. And so there'll be things that happen to you and you think, oh God, why do I always do that? You'll have deep set beliefs that are stored in your computer that you respond to. And it's only when you have a conversation with someone you realise you have those beliefs. You know, things like that are stored in there that I see all the time. I'm not creative, I'm no good at maths. Those types of things that you were told at 7 that live with you, and you just give it as a given. It's gone in your computer and it's a fact. So that is the problem with the computer. You're on autopilot. And so the more you can get off of autopilot and examine what's going on, the better, because then you raise your self-awareness. The critic, and they say it can live in both of these, and one can spark the other. But the critic lives in the chimp or the computer. So if you think about my example from earlier, you know, that's got to be in my computer. It's been stored in there from when I was a child. So I was in a nice zone when I'm presenting. I'm quite happy on my feet. And all of a sudden I get hijacked by this thing that's stored in my computer. And as it comes up from my computer, the chimp starts to get anxious. And so the chimp responds to that. But that is stored in my computer. So by taking my time to think about where that comes from, I can reprogram that computer. And Steve Peters calls them gremlins and goblins that are in your computer. Some are reprogrammable, others are not. But even the ones that are not, as long as you're aware of them, you just can say, it's okay. You know, it's okay. I know I always feel that this situation is difficult for me. I'm just going to do my best through here, but I know it's going to feel like that. And that self-awareness will change your behaviour, because even acceptance for some things, once you accept you stopped getting anxious, you can calm that chimp, because all the time what you're doing is looking to calm the chimp, really, so you can get back to the human and the logical self. So that's where the other story I'll tell you is one of a lady that I coached, and this is sort of typical, and it happens all the time when I'm coaching people, and they say, well, I don't really have many problems, but this one, she said, I have a problem when my suppliers, she worked as the POS buyer for a big corporation, And she was a high flyer, did her job really well, but she said, when things go badly wrong with my supplier, I'm not firm enough with them, and I don't know why. I can be firm with people internally, but I'm just not being firm with my supplier. And when we did the thing about getting in the zone, having a really look at it, get in touch with feelings, intuitions and thoughts, what came through for her was when she was at school, she was bullied. And so as the purchaser, as the client, she knew the power was with her. So she felt if she pushed the supplier too hard, she was acting like a bully. So it's a misplaced. And once she knew it, she could say, well, that's ridiculous. You know, I can, by pushing that supplier harder, I'm going to keep them as a supplier. I'm not going to get rid of them. And also, they've got a chance to be better with other people. You know, so there's a positive side, but she wasn't looking at that. And she'd just taken on board that it felt wrong to her, and she felt like she was playing the part of the bully. And that comes up a lot. So it's, again, it's something that's quite deep-rooted in the computer for her. So what I want you to do, and you've all got pens and paper, I think, we're going to do a bit of doing. I want you to think about a time that you've been bothered by your inner critic. And it can be that you just have a feeling and you're uncomfortable in situations, and there's always certain situations you're uncomfortable. So maybe you are a manager and you always feel uncomfortable when you're having to give somebody quite hard feedback. Or, you know, maybe it's a time where you are on your feet and you stutter or you don't feel confident. So whatever situation that is reoccurring and that's caused you problems and that's come from either some sort of limiting belief or the inner critic. But the thing is with this is to think about things that are reoccurring rather than sort of, you know, this wide thing, because the critic comes up in lots and lots of instances. So if you can pick something that's really going to help you understand it, it makes it a useful session for you. So think about an instant. Think about the hard facts. Where were you? What was the environment? Who were you dealing with? Who was involved? What tasks were involved? What was happening? You know, what was happening in the workplace? Was it stressful? Were there lots of changes going on? What was happening physically for you at the time? Were you tired? Were you stressed? Were you having problems at home? So that's sort of the hard stuff. And then think about the soft stuff. How were you feeling? How did you know the inner critic was present? What did it look like? What did it feel like? What were you hearing? What was your behaviour like? What did you notice about your behaviour? And what would others have noticed about your behaviour? Now, if you're really good at keeping a lid on things and not letting other people see you're stressed or your inner critic has appeared, what leaks out in the way of behaviour? Do you go quiet? Do you get more assertive? Do you get difficult? Withdrawn? What behaviours would others notice from you? And so what I'd like you to do is to map that out in as much detail as possible. I'm going to give you 7 minutes, and to be precise, and just map it out and get as clear as possible that situation on the page. So you've put that down. If you look at that and think about what is it that's triggering the inner critic or the negative head chatter in that situation, what's happening? What are you feeling? Is it something that's stored in your computer, or is it your chimp on high alert? If it's your chimp, you just have this feeling of anxiety, so a sort of state of anxiousness. If you think about it being the fight, flight or freeze mechanism, is it that type of feeling you're experiencing? Then it's likely to be your chimp. And what happens in that mode is that it's difficult to think straight at times. So you might go on to send and not actually be able to listen. And you might not be able to get your thoughts together, because what happens is your body takes the oxygen from your brains and sends it to your lungs, because it's saying get ready to run. if you get a knot in your stomach and you feel slightly queasy, again, it's your body saying, don't eat now, because somebody's going to eat you. So you need to run. So it's that natural process that stops you wanting to eat, because it's getting you ready to run. If you're drawing in breaths and you're trying to catch your breath, so you get that sort of hyperventilating, it's your body saying, fill your lungs with oxygen. And so you get this sort of shallow breathing. If that's what's happening in a situation, it's likely your chimp is operating in that. And it's that that's making you feel anxious and negative. If, like myself, in that situation, everything's fine, it's all familiar, and suddenly something comes out of the blue, or you know you're reluctant to do something and you're not quite sure what, then it's more likely to be stored in your computer. Negative head chatter, or a limiting belief, or a label that's stored in your computer. So if you look at what you've written down, what do you think is driving that limiting belief or negative head chatter or inner critic? Now we're going to look at a model to help you intervene between that bad feeling and the thought and the response that you have to it. Now this is a model taken from a chap called Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was a Jew, he was a psychiatrist, and he was Austrian, and in the Second World War he was detained in 3 of the worst concentration camps in the Second World War. So horrendous circumstances. And as he was a psychiatrist, he used the opportunity to study human behaviour. And he says, in his book Man's Search for Meaning, which is absolutely beautiful, he says, your last freedom is the freedom to choose. All the stuff we're talking about here today is your choice. It's down to you. You have control. It's your choice whether you do anything. And that's what he says, it's your last choice. The last freedom is your freedom to choose. And he describes a walk going through the German forest very early in the morning, in the midst of winter, and it's absolutely freezing. They've got nothing on their feet but cloth, and it's excruciatingly painful. And in that moment, in that 2-hour march, he chooses to have a very deep, colourful, meaningful conversation with his wife. So instead of focusing on the terribleness of it and the cold and everything else, he completely gets himself in the zone of being with his wife, having a conversation. So in that, he's made a conscious choice to experience that differently. He's exercised his independent will, and he's responded how he wants to respond, not how his captors want him to respond. Now these are terrible times, but your brain is incredibly powerful, and so is your thinking and your thoughts. And it's that you can put to your strength and change your thinking to change the outcome. Now if you look at my example, so the stimulus for me was a shut up, you're boring everybody, you need to move on. So that's the stimulus. So the first thing I have to be is aware of that. I've got a knot in my stomach and I've got this feeling that I need to rush. The second thing I do is imagine it differently. Now what I did with that scenario is I thought, actually, if I carry on and deliver the whole concept well, I will have people leaving the room with an opportunity to actually do something more meaningful or change the way they are or make their life happier. So I choose to imagine people leaving the session enriched. And I can only do that if I finish my sentence. So I choose to imagine it differently. That's all happening at a conscious level. It's not in my autopilot. And I'm exercising my independent will, and I would call that your human, is your independent will. What do you want to happen? What outcome do you want? Then I choose the response. And I find ways of doing that. So what I would do is I force a smile. I force a smile, and that keeps my energy up. When I've got the inner critic going, it gets my energy back up. I might go and have a drink of water, just pause the moment, compose myself, and then carry on. So there's all sorts of ways that you can intervene and put in a pause to stop that inner critic derailing you. And honestly, if you practice doing this, it happens in under a second. I could be having a conversation with somebody, I could be coaching someone, and they wouldn't even notice I've gone round the loop. I could be standing here, you won't notice. And I have trained other people and got feedback from other people that are presenting in front of hundreds of people that have gone around that loop as they're talking and really sort of delivered their presentation because they've had a negative thought at the beginning of their talk. So it works beautifully. So if you look at your example that you visualised in front of you, what I would like you to do is just highlight, underline or add to this, what's the first, when can I be self-aware? What's the first stimulant? What's the first thing I hear, feel in that situation? And then the second thing I want you to do is reimagine it. How can you see it differently? And then I want you to say, what do I want my response to be? What does my human want the response to be? So just give you sort of 3 minutes just to think through that. Because if there's things that with your chimp, it's just quieting them down. And I think that reimagining helps a lot. And the more you can find something that's real to you, the quieter your chimp will be quicker. If you try and impose something on your chimp that doesn't feel right, what will happen to your chimp, do you think? Yeah, yeah. It's going to feel really even more uncomfortable. But to start this process, it does feel, it's going to feel quite uncomfortable, I guess, so it could do. So, is anyone learning a musical instrument at the moment? Random question. No? No? I am learning to play the drums. And it's a fantastic thing to see how your brain works. When I get the most, and I've had 5 lessons, so it's pretty early days. When I get these simple rhythms from my teacher that look so easy, I get them home and nothing really functions. Because you've got to do your 2 feet on the 2 cymbals and drums and things, and you've got the 2 hands, and you've got different rhythms, and you're reading music. So the clunkiness of your brain is incredible. It's like, this is not going to go in. And it's the most simple thing. So then what I do is break it down. So I might be doing the hands and 1 foot, and then I might do the other foot. And after practicing about 10 minutes a day, maybe 15, after about 3 days, it like goes click, and everything functions. And it's like I've always known how to play that rhythm, and my feet have moved that way. So all that sort of chug, 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 bang, in the computer. And it's a lovely feeling, more so for my family than me. But that's what this is like. So what I would say is you've got your scenario. Go away and think about your self-awareness first. Try and build up your knowledge of yourself, what's happening. That's the first step. That second step, reimagining. Think of things differently. That's quite simple to do that. And build this process up so it becomes and feels natural. Don't be hard on yourself, but do it every day. Do something about it every day. And if your chimp is a worrier, and if you have, you're suffering from low self-esteem or your confidence has taken a knock, you just got to be gentle with yourself. Every day on the way home, think of 3 good things you've done. Put it on a post-it note, stick it on the fridge. Every day. And at the end of the week, make a note of the 3 best things you've done that week and leave that on the fridge. Just do little things like that, and all you're doing all the time is building up your chimp's well-being. You're settling it down, because the more confident you are, the quieter your chimp will be. You know, who's been in a situation where they feel completely unconfident and out of their depth? Your chimp is on overdrive. It's either on overdrive or it's gone on to freeze. You do nothing. You sit in a meeting, you say nothing. So it's that nurturing yourself, but the self-awareness is the first thing. Look for opportunities to look at the good things you're doing, and that will calm your chimp. Then the other side of that is the computer. Really understand what labels you've put in there, what you've programmed it, because most of it will be untrue. Or you'll be able to look at it a different way. But it's really important just looking at the things that are holding you back the most and focusing on those, because we don't have bags of energy, we don't have lots of time. So really focus on the things that are holding you back the most or causing you the most anxiety or pain or uncomfortable feelings. And really, the more you do this, the freer you will be to really perform at your best. It isn't about being the best version of yourself all the time, but it is about you deciding your freedom to choose who you respond to. So you'll be able to fly and be free of your inner critic. But so I would just urge you to take parts of the model, talk to each other, you know, meet up, give your chimp a name. You know, I think I call mine Nigel. So, and I don't know why, but it just feels right. So, you know, give it a name and just, and I say to it, be quiet, you know, you're okay, we're going to be all right. And I talk to my chimp, because it is, and Steve Peters talks it like it's not really you, but part of you that you have to manage. Thank you very much.